In the quiet, rain-soaked town of North Willow, Oregon, where fog rolls in like a living shadow every night, a young nurse named Emily Carter vanished without a trace after her late shift at the local hospital. It was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday, another long night of caring for patients and sipping cold coffee. But what happened after she clocked out at 2 a.m. became one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries the town had ever seen. Her card disappeared, her phone went silent, and the peaceful little community was suddenly swallowed by fear and suspicion. What began as a missing person case soon unraveled into a dark story of secrets, obsession, and something far more sinister lurking beneath the surface. The clock on the hospital wall ticked quietly, its rhythm lost beneath the soft hum of fluorescent lights. It was 1:37 a.m., the hour when the world outside North Willow Community Hospital was completely asleep. The small Oregon town lay wrapped in a blanket of fog and silence, and inside, only the faint scent of antiseptic and coffee lingered. Emily Carter moved down the hallway, her sneakers making no sound on the polished tiles. Her tired eyes reflected both exhaustion and calm, the kind of calm that comes only after months of night shifts. To her, the hospital's darkness was a comfort, not a curse. She'd always said night felt safer than day, though no one ever understood why. That night had been unusually quiet. Two elderly patients were asleep in the West Wing, one child in observation, and the emergency room had seen no activity since midnight. Nurse Linda, her supervisor, had gone home early, leaving Emily to finish the paperwork alone. At 1:42 a.m., Emily signed the final report, exhaled, and glanced out the glass doors toward the parking lot. The fog outside was thick, so thick that even the street lamps looked like ghostly orbs suspended in the mist. For a brief moment, she thought she saw movement, a shadow, maybe a person, near the far end of the lot. But when she blinked, it was gone. At 1:42 a.m., Emily signed the final report, exhaled, and glanced out the glass doors toward the parking lot. The fog outside was thick, so thick that even the street lamps looked like ghostly orbs suspended in the mist. For a brief moment, she thought she saw movement, a shadow, maybe a person, near the far end of the lot. But when she blinked, it was gone. At 1:42 a.m., Emily signed the final report, exhaled, and glanced out the glass doors toward the parking lot. The fog outside was thick, so thick that even the street lamps looked like ghostly orbs suspended in the mist. For a brief moment, she thought she saw movement, a shadow, maybe a person, near the far end of the lot. But when she blinked, it was gone. She brushed it off with a small laugh. Too many horror movies, she muttered under her breath. Emily gathered her things, a thermos, her car keys, a navy blue jacket, and her phone, which had 2% battery left. She texted her roommate, "Shift done, be home in 20." The message showed, "Delivered." Then her phone screen went dark. Outside, the cold hit her immediately. The wind carried that familiar Pacific chill, the kind that stings your face and smells faintly of pine and rain. She crossed the parking lot, her steps echoing in the emptiness. Every few seconds, she felt the weight of silence pressing closer. The fog muffled everything. Even her own footsteps seemed to disappear before they reached her ears. Her white Toyota Camry sat under the farthest light, where the illumination barely touched the ground. She unlocked the door, tossed her bag on the passenger seat, and sat behind the wheel. For a moment, she didn't start the car. She just sat there, eyes fixed on her reflection in the rearview mirror. There was something uneasy in the air, something she couldn't name. Then, a faint sound, a thud. Somewhere behind her, Emily turned. The parking lot looked empty. A second thud. Closer this time. Her heart raced. She leaned over to lock the doors. But before she could, her headlights flickered. Once, twice, and then steadied. Okay, that's new, she whispered, forcing a smile. She started the car, the engine humming softly. The digital clock read 20:03 a.m. She shifted into drive and rolled out of the lot, headlights slicing through the fog. The hospital faded behind her, swallowed by white mist. The road home, the road to her apartment, was a narrow, winding stretch that cut through the woods. On clear nights, you could see the mountains in the distance. But tonight, there was nothing, just darkness and fog. Emily drove slower than usual. The radio crackled, struggling to find a station. Finally, an old jazz tune filled the car, soft and haunting. She tried to shake off the unease. It wasn't the first time she'd driven home this late, but something about this night felt heavier, the silence thicker. Every turn of the road seemed unfamiliar, even though she'd driven it hundreds of times. At 2:12 a.m., she saw headlights in her rearview mirror. A vehicle appeared out of the fog, dark, large, moving steadily behind her. Probably another night shift worker heading home, she thought. But as the miles went by, the car didn't overtake her. It just followed, keeping the same distance. Emily's grip tightened on the steering wheel. She turned the radio off. The silence inside the car became deafening. Her breathing grew shallow. The vehicle behind her adjusted speed every time she did. When she reached the fork near Bridge 34 Highway, she decided to test it. She turned right, a longer route home. The SUV followed. Her pulse began to race. Okay, not funny, she whispered. At 2:17 a.m., the fog thickened again. She could barely see 10 feet ahead. The bridge loomed in front of her, a long, narrow path suspended over the river. As she began to cross, the SUV's headlights grew brighter, closer. Emily's phone buzzed. A message notification blinked on the dark screen. Unknown number. Why did you leave so soon? Her stomach dropped. She hit the gas. The car sped across the bridge, tires screeching against the wet asphalt. But before she reached the end, the engine sputtered and died. The lights went out. The car rolled to a stop in the middle of the bridge. Behind her, the SUV stopped too. For several seconds, neither vehicle moved. Only the river's faint roar below broke the silence. Then, the SUV's lights turned off. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for her phone, but it was dead again. She tried the ignition. Nothing. She looked in the rearview mirror, but the fog had swallowed everything behind her. And then she saw it, a faint figure, emerging from the mist behind her car. Slow, deliberate steps. Emily locked the doors, heart hammering in her chest. The figure stopped near her taillight, stood there, watching. She couldn't see the face, just a dark shape, breathing fog into the air. Then, a hand reached out and traced something along the back window. A single word, "Stay!" Emily screamed. She slammed her hands on the horn. It didn't work. She tried the headlights. Dead. It was as if every circuit in her car had shut down. The figure leaned closer, now inches away from the glass. Emily couldn't move. Her body was frozen, her mind screaming. And then, just as suddenly, the figure turned and disappeared into the fog. Moments later, the SUV's engine started again. Its lights flared. Emily took a breath, and then her car roared back to life on its own. She didn't think. She just hit the gas and sped across the bridge, tires slipping on the wet surface. Her heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. The SUV didn't follow this time. She didn't look back until she reached the highway. When she finally made it to her apartment complex, it was 2:39 a.m. She parked, shaking, staring at her reflection in the windshield. In the faint streetlight, she saw something smeared on her back window, written in thick, dark streaks. It wasn't just the word stay. Below it were two handprints, small, child-sized. The morning after Emily Carter's disappearance, the small town of North Willow felt like it was holding its breath. The fog, that usually cleared by dawn, lingered longer than usual, clinging to rooftops and wrapping around streetlights like a ghost that refused to leave. Her roommate, Sophie, noticed her absence first. The untouched coffee cup on the counter, the perfectly made bed, and the silence where Emily's usual morning hum should have been. She called the hospital, thinking Emily might have stayed for an extra shift, but when the nurse on the other end said Emily had signed out at 2 a.m., Sophie felt the first sharp edge of panic. By noon, the missing person report was filed, and the quiet town that prided itself on safety began to whisper. Detective Mark Hansen arrived at the hospital that afternoon. He was a man who had seen too many cases end without answers, but this one immediately felt different. The staff were cooperative, but nervous. Their eyes avoided his. Security footage showed Emily leaving the hospital exactly at 2:01 a.m., stepping into the fog with her bag slung over her shoulder. Across the street, barely visible, a dark SUV idled under a streetlight. The license plate was caked in mud, unreadable. The next camera caught her car pulling out of the lot, and then nothing. 2 minutes later, the feed cut to static. 3 days passed with no new leads, until Emily's mother received a call from her daughter's number at 2:14 a.m. The call lasted only 2 seconds, filled with a faint hiss of static. Two more calls came within minutes, the same time each night, all from the same tower on the outskirts of town. The signal traced to a deserted rest stop 20 miles east. When police searched the location, they found Emily's white Toyota Camry parked behind a rusted vending machine. The driver's door was unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition. On the passenger seat lay her hospital ID and a folded note that said, "I didn't mean to." Inside the car, there were no signs of struggle, no foreign fingerprints, nothing that led anywhere. The only clue was a corrupted 5-second clip from her dashboard camera, fog, the faint outline of the road, and a blurred figure in the back seat leaning forward before the screen cut to black. That night, Sophie received a voicemail from Emily's phone. It began with heavy static. Then came the sound of shallow breathing and a faint metallic clang, like a chain dragging across the floor. Then Emily's voice, distant and trembling. "I didn't want this." The audio technicians amplified the background and picked out 3 details: a humming generator, the rush of running water, and a whisper that said, "She knows." Each new discovery only deepened the mystery. The locals started telling stories of Emily's ghost, of strange sounds on Bridge 34 where her car had last been seen. But Detective Hansen didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in patterns, and when he dug through old records, he found 2 other missing nurses from nearby towns, both last seen leaving work after a night shift, both with final text messages that read, "Be home in 20." A week after Emily vanished, Hanson's office phone rang at 2:04 a.m. The caller ID read, "No number." The voicemail that followed was 30 seconds of chaos, static, breathing, a heavy thud, and then Emily's voice again. "He's watching me. Please." At the 20-second mark, there was the sound of a door creaking open, followed by that same metronomic ticking. The call ended with a whisper that made Hanson's blood run cold. "Bridge 34. It's not over." The next morning, police returned to the bridge. The fog was so thick that visibility dropped to a few feet. But near the railing, they found a silver bracelet engraved E. Carter. On the cold steel beneath it, faint handprints shimmered in condensation, small, child-sized, identical to those smeared on the rear window of her car. By now, the investigation had turned into obsession. Hanson filled his office walls with photographs, maps, and red string, linking every clue. Each new lead circled back to the same moment, 2:17 a.m., the time her car was last seen on camera, the same time every call was made. It was as if someone or something was trying to recreate that night over and over again. He didn't sleep. He didn't stop. And when the phone on his desk rang again, right on schedule at 2:17, he already knew who it would be. The line crackled. The sound of water filled his ears, and then came her voice, soft, near a whisper, trembling through the static. "Detective, please listen." Then the call ended, leaving only silence and the steady ticking of something unseen. The fog rolled thick over Bridge 34, wrapping the steel and asphalt in a ghostly shroud. Detective Mark Hansen stood at the center of it, his coat soaked through, the taste of rain and rust heavy in the air. The river below churned with slow violence, dark and endless. He had been here too many times, chasing the same question that refused to die. What really happened to Emily Carter? The bridge was silent now, except for the groan of metal and the faint sound of dripping water. Somewhere deep inside him, Hansen knew the answers were close, too close. The forensics report from the previous night still echoed in his head. The fingerprints on the railing were not Emily's. They were smaller, like a child's. The town had already turned her story into a ghost legend, whispering about the North Willow Hands. He hated the name, but the truth felt even stranger. There were no children anywhere near this place, not for miles, and yet something had left those prints. Something small, deliberate, and alive. He turned back toward the end of the bridge, where the support beams dipped into the water, the spot marked in the inspection log as hollow structure. When the engineers had mentioned it, he thought it was a mistake, a glitch in old blueprints. Now he wasn't so sure. Beneath the bridge, the steel groaned like an old ship in the tide. A narrow concrete shaft, hidden behind a rusted panel, led into darkness. The air was thick, damp, metallic. His flashlight trembled slightly in his hand as he moved forward, every breath fogging in front of his face. The tunnel opened into a small chamber. The floor was littered with broken glass, cables, and an old radio resting on its side. It was on, humming faintly. Then the hum changed. A slow, mechanical tick, perfectly spaced, identical to the sound that played in all of Emily's voicemails. When Hansen reached out to touch it, the radio snapped alive with static. Then a voice. "He's still here." He froze. The cord was cut, the batteries missing, but the voice had been clear. Emily's voice. In the corner of the chamber, half buried under dust, he found a folded photograph. It showed Emily standing in the hospital parking lot the night she vanished. She was smiling, unaware of the figure behind her. A tall man in a white coat, face blurred by motion. Hansen squinted, enhancing the image later through the department's software. The ID tag was barely visible, but enough to read a name: Dr. Alan Reeves, the surgeon who'd resigned months earlier, after the unexplained death of a patient named Thomas Vale. Emily had been investigating that case before she disappeared. The connection now felt undeniable. Hansen drove through the storm to the address Reeves had left on file, a remote cabin near the quarry. The place was almost swallowed by trees, the roof sagging, the generator humming faintly behind it. Inside, the air was stale and chemical. On the table sat a tape recorder, blinking red. He pressed play. A man's voice filled the silence. She wouldn't stop asking. I told her to leave it. I didn't want this. I didn't mean to. The tape cut out. Beside it lay a box of cassette tapes labeled Patient Recordings, NWCH. He played another at random, and what came through made his blood run cold. It was the laughter of a child, followed by Emily's whisper, "Who's there?" Then silence, then the same word repeated through distortion, "Stay." Outside, the wind howled, and somewhere in the woods, a light flickered. Hansen stepped onto the porch, scanning the trees. Down by the river, something glimmered, a small silver locket. He waded through the mud and picked it up, wiping away the dirt. Inside was a photo of Emily and another woman, smiling together. On the back, a simple engraving, for S, Sophie, the roommate. The connection deepened, and dread followed. Back in town, Sophie's eyes filled with shock when Hansen showed her the locket. "That's mine," she whispered. "Emily said she found it at work. I thought I'd lost it weeks before she disappeared." Her hands trembled as she spoke. "She told me something strange the night before it happened. She said, if anything happens, check under the bridge." I thought she was joking. 2 days later, divers returned to the river beneath Bridge 34. The current was strong, the water black as oil. Near the eastern pillar, they found an old storm drain sealed with a rusted grate. When they pried it open, a plastic evidence bag floated free. Inside was Emily's hospital ID card and a waterproof phone. The phone powered on, showing a single audio file, time-stamped October 21st, 2019, 2:18 a.m. Emily's voice filled the room during playback, trembling but steady. "If you're hearing this, something's wrong. He's not who he says he is." The patients, some of them never left. They're under the bridge. Don't trust anyone at the hospital, especially. The recording cut off, replaced by the same relentless ticking. The forensic team extracted one more corrupted file. An image. It showed the tunnel wall, wet and stained, with words painted in thick black streaks. "Be home in 20. Under it, faint and smaller, another line appeared when the brightness was adjusted. "We never left." Hansen stared at the photo until dawn, the edges of the paper trembling in his hands. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, like something alive. His phone buzzed once, cutting through the silence. Unknown number. He didn't answer. Seconds later, a voicemail arrived. He played it without thinking. Through the static, a familiar voice whispered, "Detective Hansen, it's Emily." The fog over North Willow thickened that night, swallowing the town in silence. The street lamps glowed like dying candles as Detective Mark Hansen returned once again to Bridge 34. He had lost count of how many nights he'd stood there, but this time felt heavier, closer to the truth. The air smelled of metal and rain. Beneath the bridge, the river whispered its secrets, cold and endless. Forensics had confirmed the fingerprints weren't Emily's. They were smaller, like a child's. The story had already twisted into legend, but Hansen wasn't chasing ghosts. He was chasing something real. He moved to the east end of the bridge, where the old inspection logs had mentioned a hollow beam. When his flashlight hit the steel, he noticed a seam, a hidden panel. Inside was a concrete tunnel, narrow and slick with moisture. The sound of his own breathing echoed as he stepped inside. The deeper he went, the stronger the smell of rust became. Then he found it, an old radio humming faintly on the ground. It emitted the same rhythmic ticking that haunted every voicemail. When he touched it, static burst through the air, followed by Emily's voice whispering, "He's still here." The radio wasn't plugged in, yet the voice sounded alive. Back in town, Hansen enhanced the photo, recovered from the tunnel, a grainy picture of Emily standing in the hospital parking lot, her eyes tired but smiling. Behind her stood a man in a doctor's coat, face blurred. The ID badge, barely legible, read, Dr. Alan Reeves, the same surgeon who'd quit after the suspicious death of a patient named Thomas Vale, the same file Emily had been reviewing before she vanished. Hansen drove through the storm to Reeves's last address, a rotting cabin by the quarry. The wind howled through the trees as his headlights swept across the porch. Inside, dust coated everything except a small recorder on the table, its red light blinking. He pressed play. Reeves's voice spilled into the dark. She wouldn't stop asking. I told her to leave it. I didn't mean to. The tape cut out. A box beside it was labeled Patient Recordings, NWCH. Hansen played another. A child's laughter filled the room, followed by Emily's whisper, "Who's there?" Silence. Then a distorted word. Soft but clear. "Stay." When he stepped outside, he noticed light flickering by the riverbank. Something silver glimmered in the mud. He crouched and pulled up a locket engraved 4S. Inside was a picture of Emily with her roommate, Sophie. The next morning, he showed it to her. Sophie's voice trembled. "That's mine." Emily said she found it at work. She told me if anything happened, to check under the bridge. 2 days later, divers searched the river again. Beneath the east support beam, they found a storm drain, sealed shut. When they pried it open, a plastic evidence bag floated up. Inside it, Emily's hospital ID and a waterproof phone. The phone held a single audio file, dated the night she disappeared. Emily's voice was calm, but shaking. "If you're hearing this, he's not who he says he is." The patients never left. They're under the bridge. Don't trust anyone at the hospital, especially... The recording ended in the same mechanical ticking. Forensics recovered one last, corrupted image. The tunnel wall, smeared with black paint. In bold letters it read, "Be home in 20." Beneath it, faint but visible when brightened, smaller words, "We never left." Hansen stared at the printout until sunrise. The fog pressed against the window like a living thing. His phone buzzed once. Unknown number. He let it ring, then played the voicemail that followed. Through the static came a whisper. Soft, pleading, familiar. "Detective Hansen, it's Emily." Detective Mark Hansen had disappeared. And for the first time in weeks, North Willow fell completely silent. The police treated it like a simple case of exhaustion. Maybe he left town, maybe he broke down, but Sophie knew better. She had seen the look in his eyes the last time they spoke, the same haunted stare Emily had before she vanished. It wasn't the look of a man running away, it was the look of someone who had seen something they weren't supposed to. The hospital shut down a week later. Officially, it was because of structural safety concerns. But everyone in town whispered the truth, that the place was cursed, that the walls still echoed with voices after midnight. On the 8th night after Hanson's disappearance, Sophie woke up to a sound that didn't belong. Her phone, lying on the nightstand, vibrated once. The screen lit up with a notification she hadn't seen in months. Emily Carter, voice message. Her breath caught in her throat as she played it. The recording was faint, full of static and dripping water, but through the noise came Emily's trembling voice. Sophie, don't come looking for me. He's still here. He never left. Then the sound of footsteps, a door slamming, and silence. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m. The same minute every strange event had happened. Sophie called the police, but when they arrived, the voicemail had vanished from her phone. The next day, she drove to the hospital, despite every warning in her body screaming not to. The fog was thicker than she'd ever seen it, almost alive. The front doors were chained, but one of the side entrances was broken open. Inside, everything was exactly as it had been the night Emily disappeared, except for one thing. Every clock on the wall had stopped at 2:17. Sophie walked through the halls, her footsteps echoing, her flashlight flickering against peeling paint and rusted equipment. As she passed room 214, she heard something faint behind the door, a soft, rhythmic tapping. She pushed the door open and froze. The bed was still there, the walls covered in faded stains, but on the pillow lay a small digital recorder, still blinking red. Her hands shook as she pressed play. Emily's voice came through, clearer this time. They used to bring them here at night. They said it was for treatment, but it wasn't. They were testing how long the brain remembers sound after death. He said I could hear them, even when I was asleep. He said I would learn to talk back. Then the voice changed, distorted, lower, almost mechanical. You did. Sophie dropped the recorder and stumbled backward. The lights in the hallway flickered violently, one after another, until everything went dark. Somewhere down the corridor, a door creaked open. She could hear someone breathing. Slowly, she turned toward the sound and saw the faint glow of a phone screen lying on the floor. On it, a message notification blinked. New voicemail, unknown number. She picked it up. Her reflection stared back at her from the cracked screen, eyes wide, terrified. The phone began to play automatically. This time, it wasn't Emily's voice. It was Hanson's. Sophie, if you're hearing this, leave now. She's not alive. She's not dead either. They kept her under the hospital. She's still calling, but it's not her anymore. The message ended with the same ticking sound. Tick, tick, tick. Sophie's flashlight flickered back on for a moment, and in that dim light, she saw something written on the far wall in dark red letters. Listen, the ticking grew louder, filling the air, vibrating through the walls. She covered her ears, but it only grew stronger until it sounded like hundreds of heart monitors beeping at once. Then, all at once, it stopped. The silence that followed was so deep, it felt alive. And in that silence, a voice whispered directly into her ear, so close she could feel the breath. Be home in 20. The flashlight died completely. Outside, the hospital lights turned on, one by one, though no power was running. From the highway, Drivers later said they saw a figure standing in the east wing window that night, a woman in blue scrubs staring out through the fog, one hand pressed to the glass, as if waiting for someone to finally listen.